Okay, so another question that usually popped up, and I thought let's discuss it and what you think about it is whether Wu Xie is gay and what's his sexual orientation. So basically, I got lots of asks like this one, for example. Can I ask you about your headcanon about Wu Xie's orientation, sexuality, or at least what it seems like for you when you've read the books? I've seen pansexual, demisexual, and ace. What's your take on this? And I've had lots of DMs asking about A Ning, because in all adaptation it was implied that she had feelings for him. Was it one-sided or not? What about Xiaoge in the books? What about Sunan, etc., etc.? How he is in general with girls, and about romance and stuff like that. So I thought, why not talk about this? So personally, I'm not much for labeling, whatever it's called. Like, I'm not gonna dive deep into this stuff, and I'm not much for headcanons either. I honestly usually just combine in my head canon fact and make certain conclusions based on that for myself. And I don't know if it's a headcanon really or what it is, but basically here's my arguments. I'm in no way saying I'm right and you should think so too, so it's just my thoughts on this. So for me personally, during reading the books, I've always thought that he's 100% gay. Like, that's the only vibe he gave me. And here's why. With argument based on canon, I'm not gonna talk about non-Paisan Shu's, authors' interviews about how they are not gonna date any girls because they are only interested in each other and stuff like that. I'm not gonna cover this one. I'm not gonna dive into this. I'm only gonna talk specifically about my feelings about this whole situation while I read the book. So basically, there is a shit ton of quotes of Wu Xie's thoughts like, why can't I be like a normal guy and sit in front of the fire with a girl, and I'm here in some tomb instead? And then after the age gap, even when he's older, he says stuff like, I always found myself weird, and I quote here, I always found myself weird. I see everyone talking about women, why wasn't I interested in that? Why wasn't I interested in pricey wine and girls and stuff like that? About 10 of those where he questions why he's not interested in girls specifically. And during Xiaoge's birthday, I think it was, Panza told him, let's go find you a girl to distract you. There's a girl who is interested in you, and let's just go find you a date. And Wu Xie didn't understand why Panza found that entertaining, thinking that he didn't want it even in the slightest. With that, I honestly can't remember all the quotes from the books. I noted just some of those, but there was a lot of moments like this, so I can 100% canonically say he's not interested in women. He's just constantly mentioning stuff like, I do not get why I'm not interested, as in just genuinely not getting it, but not in a panicky way, just I don't understand what's so interested about girls. There are lots of situations where he thinks about, shouldn't I be interested in what Panzi is interested in my age? And he's thinking about it and goes, but I don't want it. And that's literally how it goes. There's also an interesting episode considering Xiaobai, because in the books, when she was like fangirling and asking him about the autograph, well, you remember this scene from the drama too. At first, because of her hair, he thought she was a boy. And his mind, I quote, went about how surprised he was that he was so openly fawning over a guy, and how wouldn't it be scary and weird if others saw this. So there's definitely that. It was like in a fascinated and surprised kind of way, so make your own assumptions about this part. Now to the second point. As you know, books are written from Wu Xie's perspective, which means that, for example, if in some books you could read some stuff like, I don't know, someone looked at someone with longing while the other didn't see it, stuff like that, as you read when it comes to romantic situations. Here it's not gonna be like that. So, and add to that the fact that Wu Xie's personality is very, very oblivious at romantic things. So basically, when it comes to girls, he just simply doesn't find it interesting enough to notice any interest from their side or observe them, basically. So it's hard to detect who felt romantic feelings for him and who didn't, canonically, because unless someone straight up come up and does something that he will note in action, or if someone says anything, for example, if Xiaobai wouldn't constantly in words reminded the reader that she had a crush on him, we wouldn't know, because Wu Xie doesn't observe them. He wouldn't in his note write something like, Xiaobai looked at me in some way I couldn't understand, which would have helped us understand that she had feelings for him, because he just doesn't look that way. So when you see in any adaptation where a woman clearly flirts with him and he purposefully ignores it or trying to find all possible ways out, that's how it goes in canon. And here we come to the most interesting part in this whole situation. There is one person who Wu Xie describes so detailed in his notes, like movements, the way he looks at him, each small thing, that you can read their feelings and understand them perfectly well, even when Wu Xie is being oblivious and goes, I don't get why this is like this, I don't get why this is happening. And guess who that is? It's Xiaoge. My favorite example that I always use is this scene during their night together before the horrendous goodbye, when they climbed the mountain. Xiaoge came to say goodbye and they spent the last 3 nights and days together. And I quote, and they were like sitting, and they were just sitting in front of each other and looking at each other. And Wu Xie wrote, he looked at me silently for the first time. I also stared back, since he refused to avert his gaze. After a while I started to think that his eyes couldn't possibly be focused on me. But when I found out that he really was looking only at my face, and so intently, I suddenly felt something very strange. Is something wrong with me? Is there some creature behind me? I kept asking him, but he stayed completely silent. I knew he was occasionally weird at times, but I couldn't at all understand what was happening right now. After a while, he suddenly asked me for a cigarette. That was even weirder, because he never smoked. I mean, you see what I mean here. Even when Wu Xie doesn't get it, as he usually is, you still perfectly well understand all what's going on in Xiaoge's head. He's trying to remember each detail of his face, so it would stay in his memory, because he's not gonna see him for another 10 years. And you understand all that. Whether it's just, as I quote again from the Restart novels, like, I was sitting on the floor of the tomb and looked at Xiaoge. He was leaning on the wall, his arms were crossed, he was looking at me, smiling so warmly for some reason. Or when, for example, Wu Xie was sick and Xiaoge couldn't contain his rage, and when he risked his life, and Xiaoge grabbed him and pushed him into the safe place, and he went. I couldn't see his face. He was holding my shoulders and suddenly gripped me so harshly I froze. I could feel his chest heaving, which never happened before. It seemed as he was very mad. Why was he mad? So basically, he observes him all the time. Like, literally, his description of Xiaoge are so detailed, it's incredible, really. As we know, he observed his fighting movements to the point where he could copy exactly what he does, and that comes to like lots of other things. About other characters, you really can't say the same. Xiaoge is literally the only one he describes so well. Here's my third point. There are many scenes in the books where as soon as romantic talks start, or talks about love, marriage, or stuff like that, Wu Xie unintentionally or intentionally looks at Xiaoge. Such as scenes like in book 6, for example, I quote, Panzi seemed to be completely enamored with Yuncai. He kept looking at her, and I thought his jaw was going to fall off. I couldn't help but laugh at him. My eyes, though, trailed off to Xiaoge, who was leaning against the stone, looking as tense as ever. I kept thinking about him. And again, during the extra where Panzi said, let's go, I found a girl who is interested in you, Wu Xie goes, I don't want that, thanks, and then it goes, my eyes traveled to Xiaoge standing in the corner. I couldn't get how Panzi at that time could even think about such stuff. So, basically, and it again happens not even 2 times, but each time. Whether it's something about marriage, love, dating, first thought that crosses his mind is Xiaoge. Why? Again, it's for you to decide, but that's just like facts. And as you know, in one of the most loudly gay extras probably, he did think about his death and described a Tibetan burial tradition ceremony, where he imagined Xiaoge playing a role of his significant other spouse and called it romantic. That makes me think that he indeed does very well know what it is, but chooses not to act on it because of there's certain circumstances, which I really don't think have anything to do with the disapproval of society. Why? Because he in fact already broke all the rules of decency by starting a war for him, and then after like turning everything upside down and leaving because he wanted to peacefully live with Xiaoge and Panzi in the village and spend all of his time with them after separation. As you know, his family and even Xiaohua, they didn't approve of his decision, because the village was very poor, and Xiaoge was, I don't know why you want to stay in this shithole, and Wu Xie went, I just want to be with him, and just want to live in peace, and we are fine here, we are great here. And Xiaoge then let it go, saying that he understood, and that it's more importantly with whom you are, not where you are. Now, point 4. A Ning's situation. The fact that she had feelings for Wu Xie, for sure, that wasn't hard to detect with her bugging him constantly for no reason. So the fact that it's really affecting any adaptation, I think it's correct. But then again, the amount of people like who were infatuated with Wu Xie in the series of these books is just a lot. Like, it's absurd because firstly it's hard not to be, because he's just that kind of person. About this thing with A Ning being mutual, no, нет, no. Why? As you know, I'm extremely still pissed at this part of Ultimate Note, because to me it just ruins a very important part of his character. It's his reaction to A Ning's death. In the books, he for quite some time was just after that in shock. He didn't cry, he just like smoked and debated about meaning of life and death, and how it can cut off abruptly. And he does have this tendency, as many heroes, to blame everything on himself, like so it's true about him saying he could have done better, but it can be applied to really everyone. As you know, he physically cut himself for failing and being the cause of hurting people in the process of his plan. He was blaming himself even when it was just simply, honestly, just their decisions and haven't had much to do with him. That's just who he is. But never in 100 years he would have risked someone's life, especially Panzer's, to save a dead body because of some sentimental reasons. There's just even a quote in the book itself about it where he goes, "Sure, I felt bad about leaving her body, but I knew very well that I had to think about those who were alive right now." So this whole scene they made in Ultimate Note, first with the bracelet and tears and montage, okay, fine, like it's for censorship, okay, but then the worst part is risking like Panzer's life, so he distracted the snakes for him to carry the body. Was a very weird decision to me. Because like I loved so much this whole description of how he digested the whole situation, and his reaction were very understandable and very rational, because he is like always very rational. That's like his main quality, except for where it comes to Xiaoge. So that's it. There was no any romantic attachments or stuff that could be seen as romantic in between in this department for him. From his side, there was no any romantic attachments to her. There was no indication of any romantic feelings, like even close. But this whole situation, it did shook him a lot, because first he did find A Ning very strong, and it was the first person he knew for quite some time who died so quickly and abruptly right in front of him for a stupid reason, despite like the fact that she was very well adjusted, you know. And that of course traumatized him and made him think harder about this whole life and death situation, because that was like first shocking experience. That's why it's caused such. And that's about it about A Ning in the book. Now, as to why I don't see him as bisexual, pansexual, I've already said it. Now, as to why I don't see him as demisexual. That's because he was drooling over Xiaoge's body and his everything literally from the very first moment he saw him, and very openly. Like, first books without knowing him, he runs around describing him, obsessing with him already, which in my opinion just don't quite, as I remember, fit the demisexual definition. Like, he didn't have any emotional bond with him yet, yet he was very, very, very clearly attracted to him, which is of course understandable, all things considering, but still, so I don't think of him as demisexual. And honestly, I'm not a pro at all 100 something existing labels. I'm just I'm whatever, and I just think everyone should like whoever they like, and I don't care particularly about how each stuff called. So I'm sorry if I don't differentiate all this gray, yellow, red, whatever stuff, etc. So I hope it's okay. And as for him being asexual, he also didn't give me that vibe either. It's just because he's clearly, I don't know, I always say he sounds thirsty when he describes Xiaoge, but I think it's personally kinda, sounds very wrong when it comes to these two, because their relationship are just very, very touching, and there's so much want and longing and just so many feelings in between that it's hard to describe. It's just, he was thirsty for him, although at sometimes I just want to say, yeah, he was thirsty for him. So that's my thoughts about this whole situation, basically. Hope this helped somehow, and let me know in your comments about your own speculations about this and what you thought was his sexual orientation, sexuality, or whatever.